Hello and welcome back. Week 24 is crunch time in fantasy as everyone is involved in playoffs right now. Some of you are starting playoffs, others are in crucial matchups right now, so this video will be a must watch. And if you're a fantasy manager and you've got these Carolina guys, Jake Gensel, Seth Jarvis on your team right now, you're probably winning your week and loving life right now. For Gensel, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points, 3 of those on the power play in his last 6 games. Jarvis on a 6-game goal-scoring streak, 8 goals in his last 8 games, including 4 game winners. And let's not forget Sebastian Aho, 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points in a 5-game point streak as of Saturday night when I put those together. Obviously, this is the kind of performance you need right now, but these guys are owned up. So as always, I'll have some shallow league targets, some deep league targets, and some goaltending streams for week 24. But before we do that, let's take a look at the schedule. And this is incredibly important right now, crucial for your weeks. There's only 47 games this week, and it's very heavy Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So we do have a couple things to talk about here. There's 2 4-game weeks, Anaheim and Vegas. Anaheim does not have the best schedule. You got a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then this Sunday game is at Vancouver, who is number 1 in the NHL in goals against per game in the month of March at 1.56. So very stingy, not the best opportunity to pick up Ducks, not the best matchup for that. So you would probably prefer to have some Vancouver Canucks, and we'll get into that in just a second. Vegas has a 4-game week with a front-loaded back-to-back, and Aiden Hill just went down with a day-to-day injury, so Logan Thompson could potentially be the starter for this 4-game road trip. If he's available, he's 61% owned, so you do probably want to pick him up if he's available right now. And then you've also got a couple of 3-game weeks with some 2 light night schedules. So you've got Vancouver up here with a Monday and a Sunday. Again, a very favorable Sunday schedule. Then you've got Buffalo here, a nice game against Ottawa. That could be an offensive game. Both teams are very difficult to try to limit the other team's chances. And then the Devils have been getting goaltending, but their defense hasn't been great all year. So these could be some opportunities to pick up Buffalo Sabres, and we'll go into detail with those guys as well. The 2-game weeks, Minnesota, Devils, Islanders, and Tampa Bay, although Tampa and Jersey do play light nights, as you can see down here. You've got Vegas, St. Louis on Monday, LA, Vancouver on Monday. Wednesday, you've got Ottawa, Buffalo, Boston, Tampa, and then Friday, Devils, Sabres, and then that Sunday game, Anaheim, Vancouver. So only 1 game Sunday. That's really going to hurt you if you're behind in your week this week. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, if you're heading into your playoffs, week 24 to 26, this is the breakdown for the schedule. Edmonton, 13 games, 6 light nights. You've also got 12 games and 6 light nights for Vegas, although they do only play 2 games week 25, so keep that in mind. And then you've also got a 6 light night week, couple weeks for Vancouver. Even though they only play 11 times, 6 of those are on the light nights. So as we saw with this week, they only have 3 games, but 2 of them are light nights. So that's why we're featuring them here. And then you also have a 5 light night set up for Arizona. Even though they only play 11, they do have 5 light nights, which is important to have if you're picking up guys just for game volume type of situation. Then you also have 4 light nights for LA, Seattle, and St. Louis. Of those, LA and Seattle have 12 games, St. Louis with 11 games. Now, if you get that week 24 bye, a lot of the same teams show up for the best and worst schedules, so it didn't change much here in terms of the graphic, but the worst schedules, Philly and Boston, they play 10 times, only 1 light night. Then you've got Florida and Columbus with 11 games, but no light nights. So that's difficult. If you've got those guys, probably not a lot of you have a lot of Columbus Blue Jackets on your lineup, but there is one that we'll talk about in this video. But before we do that, let's get into some of the individual teams for this week, and we'll start with the Vancouver Canucks. Now, they are playing some really great defensive hockey in the last month, as I mentioned, number 1 in the NHL in goals against per game. So Casey DeSmith is an ad, and we'll get to him in the goaltending section of this video. But for the forwards and the D, we'll start with Connor Garland, 8 points in his last 9 games, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8% owned. So he's available in almost all league sizes, and he's currently line 1 with Pettersson and Niels Höglander, and he's on power play too, so getting a little bit of time there. He's a goal scorer, a shooter in a lot of the times where he has been productive in fantasy. Then you also have Nikita Zadorov, same level of ownership, 7%. He's a defenseman, obviously. 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points in his last 5, but you're mainly getting him for the hits and blocks. 3 hits per game, 2.66 blocks per game. Then you also have Höglander here, who I just mentioned on that top line. Both of these guys are some deeper league options that are, kind of the garden seat on this, line assignment with Pettersson. You do want access to Pettersson. He's got 2 goals in his last game, 11 hits over his last 3, and that line assignment is nice. He's 4% owned. And then speaking of line assignments, Pius Suter is line 2 with Miller and Besser, but he's also power play 1, which is a little interesting. He's the bumper spot on that power play, so you might want access to him in a very deep league. He's 1% owned, but not a lot of production there. Then you also have Elias Lindholm, who's at 51%, which is a little bit high considering his production. He's got a goal and an assist, 2 points in his last 2 games. He's line 3 and power play 2, not the best setup. And as I mentioned, if you look at the ownership percentages, he's not doing a lot lately. And we'll take a look at his file as I pull it up. But basically, a little bit after they picked him up, he was bumping up in the right direction and then just kind of fell off a cliff. From a 79 down to a 73. He's bumped up a little bit with that 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points in his last 2 games, but he's been very disappointing at coming over from Calgary and being the #1 center target for a lot of people at the trade deadline. It has not worked out lately, so that's not necessarily the best pickup, which is why I put him at the bottom, but he is one of those guys that they did go out and get for a reason, and he's been ice cold. So sometimes instead of riding those hot streaks, you find guys who are ice cold and try to get on board before they get hot. So you're looking at line assignment plays in Garland, Höglander, and Suter. You're looking at a hits and blocks play out of Zadorov, who we can look at right here. He is a hits guy, 2.31 hits per game on the season. The blocks are what has come up in the last 5 games, 2.66 blocks per game. Compare that with 0.97 on the year. That is nice to see, and he's getting a little bit of offensive production in there as well. We can take a quick look at Connor Garland. Nothing crazy here in his file. It's more of a line assignment play, but he does get a little bit of shot volume, and he does have a couple goals, 15 goals on the season. And then, not a whole lot in terms of other players. Dakota Joshua would have been a good pickup here, but he is on the IR. He was averaging 3.6 hits per game, so he's not available. So in his absence, if you're looking for that hitter, what you could do is you could find a guy like Vasily Podkolzin, who's way down here. He doesn't do anything else, but he does hit. So 3.56 hits per game for Podkolzin. He's line 4, not a great line assignment, but he has been improving, and you're just getting him for hits if that's what you're looking for. So that's going to do it for the ads for Vancouver. Up next, we'll take a look at the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Sabres were on a hot streak for a couple weeks there. They were kind of making a push for the playoffs. They've kind of fallen off in the last week or so, and so they don't necessarily have a lot of production over the last week or two. But you can go out and get JJ Peterka at 14% ownership. His shot volume was really good earlier in the year. It hasn't been quite as good lately, but he's got 5 points in his last 6 games. He's line 1 with Tuck and Thompson, and he's power play 1. You can see his trend going down pretty substantially, at least in terms of, the drops that he's taken from a 60 to a 58 down to a 56. It's not a big jump in terms of, he's gone from a 60 to a 56 or whatever. That's not crazy, but it has been consistently down for a while. He did take a nice little uptick here, but back down again. The shot volume, 2.61, is what you're mainly owning him for. He was doing that really consistently in stretches when he was getting a ton of ice time, and now he's getting that ice time again. And then the goal scoring is pretty good as well. 23 goals on the season is not bad at all. But there is another guy that we need to talk about, and that is Bowen Byram. So obviously Byram comes over and he becomes a must-add in fantasy, 95th percentile in terms of goals for defensemen. He's got 11 on the season. And then you look at these numbers, there's nothing crazy there, but when we take this away and look at his last couple of games, 6 points in his 8 games as a Sabre, 15 blocks in his last 3 games. So if you look at his game log, so you can see here an 8-block game most recently, a 3-block game before that, 4 blocks in the game against Seattle. So he's been blocking a lot more shots lately. He's still hitting, which is kind of not his game. He's more of an offensive guy. I would assume he would get more shot volume, which he was early on, 3, 4, 4. But the shot volume has kind of dried up, and he's been a hits and blocks D. And they do obviously have Dahlin and Owen Power. Owen Power is another guy that we need to talk about. He's got a goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last 5 games. He's on power play 2 along with Bowen Byram. So both of those guys getting PP2 time. And Byram has been one of those guys that was productive in terms of goal scoring and shot volume and stretches. Owen Power is kind of streaky in the same sense where they're both young players, and when they're hot, they do produce. When they're cold, they don't produce, and they don't have a good peripheral floor if they're not producing. So if you want that peripheral floor, you can look at Jordan Greenway, 17 hits in his last 6 games. And because of his size, I'm assuming he's the net front guy on PP1, but he is getting power play 1 time. 3 assists, 13 shots in his last 6 games as well. So that's a volume play for hitting specifically, and you could get a couple of power play points in there as well if you're trying to pick up Jordan Greenway. So again, these are the light night games. You got 2 light night games against Ottawa and Jersey. They've got the home back-to-back. They're at home all week, so that is preferable. And you could pick up a lot of these guys off the waiver wire. Their ownership is pretty available for a lot of different league sizes. But up next, let's take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights, and they've got a couple of guys to talk about as well. We'll start it off with Chandler Stevenson, dual position eligible, 24% owned, 5 points in his last 6 games, 2 of those on the power play. Line 2, center, and power play 1. That's what you like to see if you're getting a waiver ad at 24% ownership. He's got 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points in his last 13 games. So it's not just the last 6. He's been doing it over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So he's one of the better ads that you can pick up right now if you're looking for volume from Vegas. Now, again, you do have to remember they play this Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, but they also play all the other heavy nights, and it is a 4-game road trip. So they haven't been quite as good as they were earlier in the season in terms of offensive production and defensive production, to be honest. Aiden Hill has kind of dropped off a little bit. Logan Thompson's been playing pretty well. Down at the bottom here, 2 wins in his last 3 games, 192 goals against, and a 932 save percentage, despite the fact that he didn't have the best game last game and had an 800 save percentage. So he was playing really well before that, and even with that game, he's got these good of numbers. So he is an obvious ad this week if Hill is out. If you're looking for peripherals from this team, you're going to look at Braden McNabb, 33% owned. Every defenseman on this team blocks shots, but Alec Martinez is their main shot blocker, but Braden McNabb does it as well, and he gets some hits there as well. So 2.71 hits per game, 2.14 blocks per game over the last 7, and he's got 4 points in those last 7 games. So if he's available, that's a nice peripheral floor for you, and he's getting some offensive production in there as well. And then if you're just looking for hits, you got to look at Keegan Colasar, 3% owned, right wing, single position, 3 points in his last 3 games, 17 hits, 5.66 hits per game. So as we look at his game log, a 9-hit game, a 5-hit game, and then a 3-hit game, back to back to back, and then you've got a goal and then a 2-assist game here. So getting a little bit of everything in terms of hits and then offensive production. The offensive production you shouldn't count on, but the hits, you can see that hitting volume, 3.52 hits per game, 98th percentile, as it disappears on me for no reason. But he's a big hitter. That's the main reason you would add him. Not a whole lot else going on, but that 3.52 hits per game has been going on all season, and he's upped the game with 5.66 over his last 3. So he would be an ad specifically for hits, and you could potentially target him on that Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, and then maybe drop him and pick somebody else up for the Wednesday, Friday ads. So you could potentially do that if you're looking for hits. Maybe pick up Colasar for Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Friday, pick up somebody from Buffalo. That could potentially help you out. But that's going to do it for the ads from Vegas. Up next, we'll take a look at some of the overall trending players. And we'll start it off with one of the guys that we have to talk about, one of the teams that I've been kind of not talking about enough, and that is the Nashville Predators. You've got Gus Nyquist, who's got 43% ownership, which is relatively high, but he's absolutely earned it. So on the last 5 games, he's got a 5-game point streak, 7 points, 2 goals, 5 assists, a power play point in there as well. And then you can see he's getting a ton of assists, so 95th percentile in assists, 88th in power play points, 18 power play points on the season. Shot volume is a little bit low, but the goals are pretty nice. He's right around 20 goals on the season. He's at 19 right now. And then if you look at his last number of games, so he's got 20 points in his last 14 games, 5 of those on the power play, 6 goals, 14 assists. So it's not just this 5-game point streak. It's not just a one-off where the entire team's hot and he's benefiting from that. He's been playing really good hockey for a couple months now, so you do want to have access to him if you're in a shallow league. He's a single position left wing, which does hurt a little bit, especially in a busy week like this where everybody's playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But if you do have some flexibility on those nights, he would be an obvious pickup. Nashville, 15-0-2 in their last 17. You have to have exposure to some of these guys, and he's first line and getting some power play time as well. Now, another guy I wanted to talk about, and I own him, is Zach Werenski. So he's historically been a shot volume and goal scoring guy in terms of defenseman. That's what he's mainly been known for, and that's why I picked him up in the draft. I've been holding on to him all year despite that injury. 66% owned, 6 points in his last, I don't have the games there, but in his last like couple of games, he's got 1 goal, 5 assists, 2 power play points, and 29 shots. That's 4.83 shots per game, which is really high. And that's way higher than his average for the entire season at 2.93, which is 99th percentile for defensemen. So if you're looking for shot volume and a power play quarterback defenseman and a guy who's going to get you some blocks in there as well, he gets 1.93 on average. He's been killing it for Columbus on a team that's not very productive. He's been doing a little bit of everything. He is one of their more reliable players that you can potentially add. He's not available in all leagues, so he's not going to be there for you in maybe a 12-teamer, but in a 10-team league, if he's available, definitely go out and scoop up Werenski. If you can't get him, you could try Justin Falk. He's been getting a little bit more power play time. He's got 7 assists, 3 of those on the power play in his last 7 games, 15 hits and 9 blocks to go along with that. He's got 91st percentile assist exposure, plus 91st percentile in shots, and then you're getting some blocks and hits along the way, almost a hit and a half per game, and then 1.83 blocks per game. So you're getting a little bit of a peripheral floor there, some power play time, shot volume, and some assists on the power play. Not a lot in terms of goal scoring. He has 2 goals on the year, so that's not what you like to see. And he used to be a goal scorer, a guy who could shoot the puck from the point and score, but he hasn't been doing that this year. So you're mainly getting assists, a little bit of shot volume, and some peripherals out of Justin Falk. And as I mentioned, they do have I believe 11 games over the week 24 to 26 stretch, with 5 of those on the light nights. So this could be a longer term hold than just week 24. Now, my house account, the guy I got to talk about here is Alex Lafreniere. He's been one of the more consistent producers in terms of, guys that you can find on the waiver wire from the Rangers all season long. 39% owned, dual position eligible, 6 points in his last 6 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, a power play point. His hub doesn't look impressive because you're not getting any power play exposure from him. He's almost never on the power play. But given that lack of power play time, the fact that he's got a power play point in there is nice to see. He does hit a little bit, 1.35 hits per game, but you're mainly getting him for that exposure to Panarin and Trocheck, both of whom have been, MVP type players for the Rangers this year. Panarin at 99 points on the year, Trocheck above or at a point per game, and he's been doing a little bit of everything. He's one of the top players on the player hub right now. So Lafreniere, 39% owned. They've got a 3-game week and a couple winnable games here, one of them against Arizona. So that could be an interesting pickup this week, but you definitely want that Panarin exposure. And at only 39%, it's not going to cost you a lot. And then he is dual eligible, so he gives you a little bit of flexibility this week as well. Now, another guy I talked about in the past, I didn't particularly like picking him up in the past. There have been times over the last couple years I've gone to Jake DeBrusk and he hasn't worked out for me, but he's on fire right now, and he was on fire for the last time that I mentioned him as well. 6 points in the 5-game point streak, 3 goals, 3 assists, a power play point, 11 hits, and 16 shots in that 5-game stretch. So he's been doing a little bit of everything. And then you can see here his hub is relatively complete. Not a lot that he doesn't do. He gets some power play time, gets a couple of hits, gets a couple of blocks along the way. Shot volume at 2.36 is not bad. There are occasions where he's up above 3 shots per game. As you can see, he is above that lately with 16 shots in 5 games. And 46% ownership is a little bit high, but if you're trying to get access to Boston, and you probably should be trying to get access to their top 6, he would be one of the guys that you can actually find on the waiver wire in a 12-team league. Now, up next, we have to talk about Seth Jones. I mentioned him in a previous video as well, and he's just continued doing what he's been doing. So you can see here on the hub, 98th percentile in shots, but that was without this recent uptick in shots. 14 shots in his last 3 games. He's got 3 points in that stretch, 2 goals, 1 assist, a power play point. You do want exposure to Connor Bedard on that power play unit. And there are a couple of other Chicago Blackhawks we'll talk about in the deep league section. But for the shallow league section, Seth Jones, a power play quarterback, 60% ownership. To get that level of shot volume is crazy. Plus the blocks that you're getting, 2 blocks per game average on the year. He's been above that lately. So this is an interesting pickup. If you can find him on the wire, now would be the time to go and do that. Again, you're looking at heavy Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday volume. But if you have an injury that you're trying to replace somebody for, Seth Jones would be a nice target. If you can't find him, one of the other hottest defensemen that you can find is Dmitry Orlov. Now, there's a number of guys going in Carolina. You can find, Brady Shea's up there, but his ownership is around 75%. So Dmitry Orlov at 24% ownership, 7 points in his last 5 games, 2.8 hits per game, which is a nice bump from his 1.5 average on the season. And then he's got 2 power play points in those 5 games as well, so he's getting a little bit of power play time in there. And you can see his trend. He was trending downward for quite a while, basically back since December, and then just rocketing up in the last 2 weeks. So he's red hot right now. This would be an opportune time to pick him up. And again, you're looking at the heavy night volume, but if you're trying to find somebody and none of these guys are available, Dmitry Orlov could be your answer this week. But that's going to do it for the shallow league targets. Next, let's take a look at the deep league targets. We'll start it off with a guy who I mentioned previously in Jake Neighbors. He's getting that garden seat, and he's on the first line with Braden Shen and I believe Robert Thomas. I could be wrong about that, but Neighbors is still top line and getting some power play time. He's got 5 goals, 7 points in his last 6 games, along with 17 hits, which is a little bit higher than his average, 1.76 on the season, but he's been a goal scorer all year long. 25 goals on the season is really good. I'm not sure if he's technically eligible as a rookie. I could be wrong about that, but if he's not, he's still a young player. For 25 goals for a young player like that is really nice to see. And he is dual position eligible, so 17% owned, dual position. He's red hot right now, 7 points in 6 games, 2 of those on the power play, and he's getting you a nice peripheral floor with those hits. And if you look at his trend, it's been going up basically since December, so slightly, improving week over week, taking a little bit of a plateau here in February, rocketing up all the way until mid-February, taking a little bit of a step back, but now reaching back to where he was at that stage where I was talking about him on the channel about a month ago. So he's a nice pickup for you if you're in a shallow league, even a 12, 14 teamer. You can probably find Neighbors. But Justin Brazeau, I don't even know if I have data on him. Let's take a look and see if I can find him. He was a call up for Boston, called up not that long ago. He is in here, so he's been killing it lately. I heard a story on the broadcast the other night. He was on an ECHL contract. They had to sign him to an NHL contract to call him up, but they do, and he rewards them immediately. 4 goals, 5 points in a 3-game point streak, 11 shots and 4 hits in that stretch. He's single position, which isn't great, but he's 0% ownership right now, which is nice to see. 85th percentile in goals per game. Again, it's a per game metric. He's got 5 goals in 15 games on the year, so that's really nice, and 4 of those goals have come in the last 3 games. So he's red hot right now. Maybe not the best longer term hold, but in a short term, if you're in a really deep league, 24 teamer or something like that, Brazeau has been getting it done lately. Scored against the Rangers the other night, but didn't end up hurting them, as the Rangers did pull that out 5-2, which was nice to see. But moving on, we've got Timothy Liljegren. This is a guy I've been getting a lot of questions about in various formats. He's been getting some power play time in Toronto. As I try to shut up and just type his name in here, you're getting a lot of blocks from him. So 2.24 blocks per game is really nice to see. The power play numbers are also nice to see, and he's been getting more power play time. He's currently the power play 1 quarterback. He's got 7 points in his last 7 games, and over that span, averaging 3 blocks per game. So you're getting a little bit more than what he's been doing all season long. He does have about a 1.5 hits per game as well, so you're getting a pretty decent peripheral floor. You're getting some power play numbers, some assist totals there, and every now and then he throws in a goal. He's got 3 goals on the year, which is not bad. Now, he's not necessarily a goal scorer, so that's not why you're picking him up. You're getting him for those 6 assists, the power play coverage, and the peripherals. And at 17% ownership and getting you access to those top guys in Toronto, that would be the main reason for picking him up. Now, I mentioned Chicago Blackhawk ads with Seth Jones. Kurashev has been a guy that we talked about last week. I might have talked about him 2 weeks in a row. And this is another week we have to talk about him. You can see here on the trend, just rocketing up from a 66 to a 70. 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points in his last 11 games. 5 of those on the power play. He's getting you Bedard exposure, both 5-on-5 in the top 6 and on the power play. And he's a really skilled player in his own right. So the power play exposure, 89th percentile there, 15 power play points on the year, 89th percentile in assists as well. The shot volume is a little bit low, but he is scoring goals lately. So 6 goals of his total 15 have come in the last 11 games. So it's been much better since Bedard has come back and he's gotten some help. He couldn't really do it alone. Now nobody can do it alone in Chicago with that lineup that they've been putting out there without Bedard. But with Bedard back, they have a functioning power play unit that you can get access to. And at 7% ownership, this would be the play if you're looking at any of these guys. Neighbors would probably be your top target. Kurashev would be your number 2 target in terms of guys that have been doing it for a couple weeks now and are available. But if neither of those guys are available, same type of thing. Ryan Donato getting some production over the last 7 games, 7 points, 4 goals, 3 assists in his last 7, but 3.57 shots on goal per game in that stretch and 2.14 hits per game. So 2.07 shots per game average on the season, and he's bumped that up about a shot and a half per game in the last 7. And then the hits have come up about a little bit less than a hit per game in that stretch. So this is sort of like that Nick Foligno ad, where Foligno, when he was productive, he was getting some power play time, he was giving you the hits and some goal scoring with some shot volume. Donato has basically been taking over that role, and he's been very productive over his last 7. At 1% owned, this would be a very deep league ad, but he's definitely been killing it over the last 7 games. And again, you're getting that Bedard exposure and that PP1 time as well. Now, another guy from my house account, Braden Schneider. This is dependent on whether or not Jacob Trouba comes back, because if he's not back, Braden Schneider has been doing a really good job on that second pair with Keandre Miller. Keandre Miller is in the mid-40s in terms of ownership percentage. He's very productive in stretches, but not always offensively productive, but he's been playing some really good hockey lately. If Miller's available, I definitely recommend going out and getting him, because even with Trouba back, he'll be playing a bunch of minutes. He averages the second most time on ice of any Rangers this season. But Braden Schneider, in Trouba's absence, has been doing a really nice job. 3.16 hits per game and 2.33 blocks per game over his last 6, and he's got a couple of points in there. He does get up in the rush occasionally and gets you some shots on goal. It's not as consistent as some of the other guys that you're out there to find. You know, Trouba is one of the best hits and blocks guys out there and gets some shot volume. So if he's back, then obviously you would want him in the lineup, but he's obviously well owned up by this point. So Schneider is like a mini Trouba that you can kind of find anywhere on the waiver wire at 2% ownership. But if you're looking for that defenseman in a deep league format, Cam York might be your best option in terms of finding a guy who is a power play quarterback. Liljegren might be your best option because their power play is better than Philadelphia's, but you do have Cam York there as well. 10 points in his last 14 games, and he's been killing it with the blocks. 3.57 blocks per game, which is about 1.3 more than his season-long average of 2.17. The goal production has been pretty good. 9 goals on the year is really nice to see. 88th percentile there. Shot volume a little bit low, but this has been a nice file, as we can see. If you look at the blocks column, 4 blocks, 6, 4, 4. So the last number of games, he's been getting more responsibility and blocking a ton more shots, getting a couple hits in there as well. A 5-shot game, another 5-shot game. It's not always there with the shot volume though. And the power play points aren't always going to be there because they don't have the best power play. But you can see a bunch of assists coming, and these blocks are very consistent throughout every game. So he's been doing it for quite a while now, a 7-block game, 4 or 5. So if you're looking for that blocks floor, 3.57 average over the last 14 games is really nice for Cam York. And then you're getting some power play exposure as well, and he's got 10 points in his last 14, so you could do a lot worse than finding Cam York on your waiver wire. For the goaltending for Week 24, we'll start it off with one of the only starters that you can find right now, Casey DeSmith. Obviously, Thatcher Demko is out with an injury, so in his absence, DeSmith, 4 wins in his last 7 games. Some of that goes back before Demko got hurt, but he did come in relief and then played really well. And he's been getting a lot of starts, 1.84 goals against, .917 save percentage in that stretch. And as I mentioned before, Vancouver averaging 1.56 goals against per game in the month of March. So they've been extremely stingy defensively. That's even better than this 76th percentile team defense that you're getting out of Vancouver in general. And then you can see here, his stock has been rising basically since he became the starter, from a 39 up to a 54. That comes with some more start volume and the increase in team defense exposure, plus his save percentage has been coming up as well, and the goals against coming down. So this is one of the few starters that you can find right now. They do have a 3-game week, but if you're in need of actual goaltending starts and not just a goaltending stream, this would be one of the only guys that you can get. And he's probably available in a 12-team league, maybe not available in a 12-teamer, but definitely in a 10-team league. So if you're looking for those starts and that team defense exposure, DeSmith is the obvious choice, but you probably already know that because you're very good at fantasy if you're watching this channel. Now, another guy that we have to talk about is Dustin Wolf, and that is because Daniel Vladar is done for the season. So They do have the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule. They play Chicago on Tuesday. I wonder if Wolf gets that game. His hub does not look good at all, and that's because earlier in the season he wasn't playing that well, wasn't getting a lot of support. But in his last 4 starts, 2 wins, .931 save percentage, and a 2.14 goals against. And he's going to be relied upon a little bit more. It's not a 3-goalie system now. It's just him and Markstrom. Markstrom's been very good for the last number of weeks, and you can see Markstrom closer to the top here. He did regress a little bit just because of the team defense in front of him, but you do get Dustin Wolf at 9%. So if he's available, he's probably there for you in a 12-teamer, a 14-teamer, maybe even a 16-team league. And if he gets this start at Chicago and you're looking for some spot starts, that would be the one place I would definitely want Dustin Wolf in net. That could even be a shutout. Who knows? But Chicago, a little bit more productive with Bedard in the lineup, but they do not always score with him in the lineup. So this could be an opportunity to grab Dustin Wolf. Again, we're talking about Anton Forsberg up next. This is not another play in terms of the production that he's been getting lately, but the one thing that you would want from him is this spot start against Chicago. Same type of theme here. Whoever Chicago is playing, you probably want the goalie that they're playing against just in case, because they don't have the best offense. So Forsberg doesn't have the best numbers. .885 save percentage on the year is really bad. 3.4 goals against, also really bad. 9.9 below expected, really bad. The team defense is surprisingly not that bad, but his numbers have not been great recently either. So you're mainly just getting him for this start against Chicago if they're going to give it to him, and they do have this back-to-back, so that would be the main reason that you would pick him up. Justus Annunen, not sure exactly what the pronunciation is, but he's been on fire. So 4 wins in his last 4 starts, 2 shutouts, and believe it or not, 2 of those were against Chicago. That's why we were talking about goaltending playing against Chicago. You have Colorado's backup going in and shutting him out twice, and then he's continued that over the last 2 games after that. So 1.25 goals against, .958 save percentage in his last 4 starts. You can see the trend going up. That was mainly because of the fact he was getting a couple more starts and shut out Chicago twice. And then he's been playing really well since then. And if you look at Georgiev, his numbers are not necessarily that great. And then you compare that to a .926 save percentage, 2.4 goals against, 5.8 above expected for Annunen. So he's been doing, kind of playing a little bit better than a guy like Georgiev. For reference, here's what Georgiev looks like. .902 save percentage, 2.8 goals against is not bad. He is 11 goals saved above expected. The reason why the numbers aren't as great is because this team defense is not that great. They're an offensive-defensive core, not a defensive core, where they're limiting shots and chances. And in fact, when I looked at their high-danger shots against, they're one of the worst in the league. So the fact that both of their goaltenders are well above expected is nice to see. But of the 2 of them, Annunen has actually been hotter lately at 9% ownership. If they're going to use him at all down the stretch to maybe save Georgiev for the playoffs, this would be a guy that I would probably want to start whenever he's available to start. So if you see that check mark next to his name, I would go out and scoop him up. I've actually done that a couple times over the last couple weeks, and it's helped me out in 2 consecutive weeks where I've done that. So just a heads up for Annunen. Up next, we've got Laurent Brossoit, who is, again, I mentioned him last week. He's one of the best backups that you can find in the entire NHL, and not much has changed. So 4 wins in his last 6 games, 1.46 goals against, .946 save percentage. On the year, .927 save percentage, 2.1 goals against, 11.6 above expected. The team defense is excellent, as you would expect. It's not just Hellebuck, it's Brossoit as well. They've got a 3-game week this week, so he may or may not get in. If he does get in, you definitely want to stream him if he's available. He's almost golden for a win every time, but even if he doesn't get the win, he'll put up good numbers. So if you're in a categories league, the save percentage, the goals against should be there for you no matter what. And that's what you like to see. I don't want to jinx it because he is one of the goaltenders that I'm running with right now, but he's been very good over the entire season. It's not just been the last little stretch here. You can see it goes all the way back. This is October, and he was a 15 on the goalie hub. Comes up to a 20 here in December, and then rockets up basically from December 10th all the way on till now. He's been improving week over week and climbing every week up to now a 67. So it's been a long time for Brossoit, and he's still only 33% owned, so that's why we're mentioning him here. If you can't find him, one of the guys that you could potentially go out and grab, and this is another theme, I mentioned it earlier with Nashville, is Kevin Lankinen. And, obviously Saros is the guy. for the Nashville Predators. You can see Saros climbing all the way up, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th on the goalie hub right now. He's been killing it. They're 15-0-2 in their last 17, but every now and then they're going to have to give a game to Lankinen. You know, Saros can't play every single game. And over the last 3 games, 3 wins, 1.0 goals against, 969 save percentage with a shutout in there. He's 2% owned. So this is riding that, not necessarily a hot streak. It is a hot streak for him, but it's mainly the team hot streak that you want to ride. If he's getting a game here and there, you probably want to have him in. Just depends on the matchup. I wouldn't necessarily put him in against one of the better offensive teams, but if you see a nice matchup for him, Lankinen's been improving basically back since mid-February. So this has been, you know, consistent with that entire stretch that Nashville's been on. So if you want to go out and grab him in a deep league, this would be an ad that I would definitely recommend. 2% ownership, so he's probably there for you. Now up next, we've got Vejmelka, and this is a situation where Ingram took the net over, and he's still relatively good. But for whatever reason, Vejmelka's been playing pretty well over his last 6 games. 4 wins, 1.99 goals against, and a 935 save percentage. We saw that kind of production out of him last year, which made him the 1A at least in Arizona going into this season. And then he kind of lost that. Ingram took it over, and then Ingram kind of fumbled it a little bit. So now it's Vejmelka. At 22% ownership, he might not be there for you. In a 12-team league, he may be there. And he's not the most consistent in terms of, you know, that team exposure. 18th percentile in team defense is not the best. It's not what you like to see. He's right around expected goals against. The save volume is going to be high because they don't have the best defense. So if you're in a league with total saves, that could, you know, swing the scales in your favor. But just wanted to highlight him because Ingram was the guy, and now it's Vejmelka. So bringing that to your attention, the 899 save percentage on the year is not great, but it's up to a 935 in the last 6 games. So I did want to mention that as well. But speaking of save percentage and team defense that is not great, Jake Allen, since coming over to New Jersey, 3 wins in his last 5 games, 2.4 goals against, 916 save percentage. And he had 3 games where he was around a 945 save percentage. So it was like 944, 946, 946. He got lit up the other night in a 5-2 loss to Ottawa. That's not what you like to see, but he has been pretty good, and he got 4 starts in a row. So they seem to prefer him over Kähkönen, and that's why his ownership jumped from around 18% to 35%. It's, you know, right around double what it was last week when I mentioned him. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you got what you needed out of this. Hopefully you guys can pull out your victories this week. As I'm speaking, the week is closing up, so hopefully you guys are moving on to the next round of the playoffs. If you got anything out of this video, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to get to them as best as I can.